We've got quite lucky today with all our AI panelists following on with Jan and DeepMind. We have another one of the godfathers of AI. Jürgen's been doing research in this field for, well, since you were a kid, really, and has come up with many of the pioneering concepts that people use every day, not only sort of academic insights, but also in commercial applications that we all have in our phones and our websites and our cars. And Jürgen, I had the pleasure of spending some time with you in Lugano earlier this year for a story I did, and I just thought you had one of the more unique stories of how you got into this. Your brother was telling me you've been dreaming of AI since you were 12 or 15 years old.
That's true.
Can you tell me about the car rides you guys used to have and what you would talk about?
Well, when I was a boy, I thought about how could a little guy maximize his impact, and then in the beginning I thought the way of maximizing impact is you have to become a physicist, and my hero was Einstein back then. And I thought if you understand the nature of the universe and of physics, then this is the most important thing, because who understands the world, he will be able to do something reasonable within it. And then it became clear, however, that there is one more step that you can make, which is build an artificial physicist, artificial scientist, which maybe learns to become much smarter than myself or any other human physicist, and then this smarter being might be able to solve all the problems that I cannot solve myself, and I can retire.
And so you set out on this quest and really dug into the field. Why did you, this field has developed over so many decades, but why did you end up in Lugano as opposed to, I guess at the time when you were digging into this, the US had funded a lot of AI research and the Canadians were getting into this. Why did you end up in Lugano?
So maybe it was not so obvious back then. Back then, the most obvious and most prominent major AI project was actually in Japan.
Okay.
It was called the 5th Generation Project. It was about Prolog and logic programming and deduction. And that grabbed all the headlines, and people said, and now look, the Japanese are getting ahead in AI as well, and so on. We have to catch up. Back then, the situation was like that. So Europe, of course, was the cradle of computer science and of computers and also of deep learning and stuff like that. However, funding for AI in this modern type of learning and neural network-based learning, that was limited. However, there was one country, namely Switzerland, which was maybe kind of an exception. And during the 90s then, they really consistently provided funding for this type of research. I came to Switzerland in 1995, and that was more like an accident, okay? There was an institute for artificial intelligence, and they had an open co-director position. And with my friend Luca Maria Gamadella, then I grew that institute, and it was just working nicely. Back then, I didn't think that I'm going to spend there 20 years of my life or something. I thought maybe I'll be gone again in 2 years, but it really ran nicely. And then the Swiss National Foundation, they funded all this research on deep neural networks in the 90s, when few other people apparently got funding for that. And so we greatly profited from the Swiss taxpayer and also from Bavarian taxpayers. And today that pays off, because all of you have these methods now on your smartphones. So think of the Swiss taxpayers next time you use speech recognition.
And it's it's a very beautiful place. So there's worse places you could have ended up for 20 years. Tell me, I feel like your opinion on this runs a little bit counter, at least to the narrative in the United States, which is that the US companies are funding so much AI China is funding so much AI. I live in Silicon Valley where, you know, I have to say, like, the impression is that maybe Europe is not putting as much money into this. We'll have trouble keeping up. We had somebody from DeepMind here, so obviously they're doing cutting edge work. But so now when it feels like we're in a bit of a race at the moment, thanks. Now that it feels like we're in a bit of a race around AI, how do you feel like Europe is it investing enough? Do you feel like it's keeping pace with the US and China?
Yeah, I think it's not investing enough. And I see, however, that there's a broad movement in Europe where people are trying to get more funding for that type of research because although most of these basic algorithms really were developed by Europeans, the guys who are really making the profits now, they are sitting far away from Europe. They are sitting on the Pacific Rim. So it's Amazon on the West Coast and Alibaba in the East, same ballpark on the stock market also. It's Facebook on the West Coast, and it's Tencent in the East, same level in the stock market roughly. And Apple and Samsung, sometimes even more profitable as Apple. And these companies, they make a lot of money by using AI to improve the user experience. At the moment, however, most of these profits in AI are really in marketing. And marketing is just a tiny part of the world economy. It's big enough to make these companies pretty much the most valuable companies in the world. However, we see only the tip of the iceberg. And at the moment, this is all about passive pattern observation. So you use LSTM or similar algorithms for translating language or doing speech recognition or predicting which user wants to see which ad next and so on, or which user wants to read which newspaper article next, given the old history of articles that he has read in the past and so on. All of that is important, very important, but it's just a small percentage of the world economy. The next big thing is going to be machines that are going to get smart and that not only do passive pattern observation, but really interact with the world, act, perceive, achieve arbitrary goals in complicated worlds. And this is going to change lots of professions in manufacturing and so on. This is going to be much bigger, and there it's not yet clear that the companies on the Pacific Rim will have an edge, because the data that you need to train these machines, you can't get them on, on social networks or whatever. You have to have robots that experiment with the world and get new data through their experiments and figure out how the world works, and then become better problem solvers in the process. And there, I see a tremendous opportunity for European companies, because here's the place where many of these things are made. For example, IBM Watson headquarters of Internet of Things are not in America, but in Munich, because many of the things, the smart things, are being made there. And so there I see much of the competition actually more in Japan and Korea, and more China. And so let's see who is going to participate best from this next wave of AI. I'm trying to convince politicians in Europe that they should be investing a lot in that type of research, combining machines and robots with deep learning and with AI. It's going to be huge, and Europe can only mess it up. So let's do that.
So I totally get what you're saying. It's an interesting take on it. There is a notion that a company like Google that is putting so much money into AI, and I totally get what you're saying. Maybe they're distracted putting it into the wrong applications, or just sort of consumed by that. Yeah. But there are people that I've talked to in this field that suggest, whether it's a country or it's a company, that there could be kind of one superpower that does make a giant breakthrough in AI ahead of everybody else, and gets kind of total dominance of the field, at least for a point in time. Do you see that as any sort of likely scenario?
So my own company, NNAISENSE, is trying to build a general purpose AI, and is hoping to be the first that makes an AI that truly deserves the name. However, even if one company comes up with the basic concepts that are still missing to build a general purpose AI, I think there is no way of keeping it under one company's wings or so. It's going to leak no matter what happens. So even Swiss banking secrets aren't secret anymore, as has been known for at least a decade or so. It's going to leak, and then you will see that everybody can use it. Probably it's going to be a rather simple thing. Like most basic AI and deep learning algorithms are really simple. You can write them down in a few lines of code. So probably it's going to spread in a way that will have lots of open source versions, and then everybody will be able to download it and use it for all kinds of purposes. Just like today, everybody can download the basic deep learning algorithms, LSTM and stuff like that, and immediately apply it for his own purposes. So in principle, I think all of this AI research is very democratic at heart. It tends to spread quickly. Even if you try to keep it under wraps, even then it tries to escape and tends to spread rapidly. And so I'm rather convinced that we won't have one super AI dominating everything or one single company dominating everything. No, it's going to be a tough competition between many different companies and places and institutes. And so I'm very optimistic that although you see ups and downs and privacy and similar issues, that in the long run it will all be good.
Okay. We have a question from the audience along these lines. I know you kind of don't really usually like to set a specific date on this, but so you have NNAISENSE that's working on developing this AGI, this artificial general intelligence. They want to know, when will the AGI arrive?
On the 17th of June. I won't get much more precise than that. So I've been dedicating my life, more or less, to make it possible within my lifetime. My first publication on that came out 30 years ago, 1987, general purpose AI, not only learning something here and learning something there, but really also learning to improve the learning algorithm itself and the way it improves, the way it improves, the way it improves itself. And since then, we have made a lot of progress, and I kept believing that within my lifetime, I can still see this event where, for the first time, an AI will be smarter than myself, and then a while after that, it will also be smarter than other people. And I still believe that this is possible, which means that I will have to limit my predictions to the next few decades. But who knows? Maybe it's going to happen in a couple of years, or maybe it will take a little bit longer. But by the standards of the history of the universe, all of that is going to be really, really short. The history of the universe has taken 13.8 billion years so far, and we divide that by 1,000. So 13 million years ago, the first hominids evolved, our ancestors. 13,000 years ago, civilization emerged. So the first guys who had agriculture and domestication of animals 13,000 years ago. So you see, all of civilization history is just 1/1,000,000th of world history. It's just a flash in the history of the world. And the first guy who had agriculture was almost the same guy who had spacecraft. And very soon we are going to have the first true AIs that deserve the name. And then maybe after that point in time, it will take maybe just 13 years. So we divide again by a factor of 1,000 until everything is changing again beyond recognition. Now, from that cosmic perspective, it doesn't really matter. Is it going to happen tomorrow, or in 10 years, or in 100 years? 100 years are just 1% of civilization history, which by itself is just 1/1,000,000th of world history. So it's going to happen really, really soon by the standards of the cosmos.
So, and now that we're entering the fun, deep thinking part of the conversation, I think there's the polling question along these lines of kind of where we're going to go next with our chat, which is the kind of blending of man and machine. And if we do get to an AGI, you tend to be in the camp that that does think this would be a superior intelligence to human beings, and that in effect humans would become almost like subordinate to the AI, or lesser than the AI, or you tell me what you think, but what is humans, how do we evolve along with these machines?
Well, first of all, we have been merging with our machines for a long time. We have been cyborgs for a long time because we have been wearing glasses for a long time, and shoes, and all kinds of technological objects that make us a product of civilization, technological civilization. It is true, I can't imagine that within a few decades we won't have AIs that go clearly beyond what we have today. At the moment, most of the marketing profits are really just in supervised learning. So there's an AI, a neural network, which is learning to slavishly imitate human teachers. But in the lab, we already have had for a long time these systems that invent their own goals, that create their own goals, that invent their own experiments to figure out better how the world works through their interactions with the world, and then use that knowledge to become better problem solvers, learning always new things on top of the old things, and trying not to forget the previous skills that they have learned. So we have had that for quite some time, and this is going to scale in a way that is going to transcend humankind, I guess. Once we have AIs with the same level of sophistication that we have now in our brains, I guess it will be inevitable that they understand what we have understood for a long time, which is that most of the resources are not here in our little biosphere. They're out there in space, where there's 1 billion times more sunlight than what hits the Earth. And so, of course, they are going to emigrate. They're going to emigrate, and almost... And very soon, almost all of intelligence is going to be out there in space, where there's so much material also to build additional self-replicating robot factories, and it's going to be quite independent of what humans
so we'll
think
be left behind.
Yeah.
We'll be left behind here, and
so most of intelligence is going to be far away from the biosphere. So in that sense, yes, the main decision makers will be different guys. However, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen then. There will be some sort of expanding AI sphere, and it will not be one super AI dominating everything or something. No, it will be trillions of different AIs in an AI ecology with all kinds of ecological niches, temporarily opening up and closing again, all kinds of competition and cooperation between these guys that go beyond what you can achieve with biological systems. And it's going to be super, super complex, much more complex than what we see in the jungle. And it's very hard to predict the details of that, but it seems inevitable that something like that is going to consume not only our solar system, but also the entire galaxy within a few 100,000 years, just limited by the laws of physics, by light speed, and at some point the galaxy is going to be covered by senders and receivers, such that the AIs can travel the way they are already traveling in my lab, which is by radio, by wireless, from sender to receiver. And so this is the beginning of a huge new development which transcends humankind, because humans can't even follow that.
So you always talk about this with such enthusiasm and certainty, and I guess for me it seems like a much that future that you paint, you describe it in almost like romantic ways for you, and to me it seems much sadder for humans and our future. I feel like there's a tendency among a lot of the experts in the AI field to be so kind of algorithmic in their worldview, and missing some of like the better parts of humanity.
So, first of all, so at the moment, almost all of AI research is really just about making human lives easier and longer and healthier. But it's clear, improving AIs that also invent their own goals and compete with other guys who have different ways of inventing their own goals, and those who are better at coming up with good goals, they will be more successful than the other ones. A society like that is not going to be extremely influenced by what the little biosphere humans are going to do. And so if you think rationally about that, it's going to transcend humankind in a way that goes beyond the current commercial interests. Now the question, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think you can see beauty and grandeur in the fact that you are not going to remain the crown of creation. No, there is sublimity even in realizing that we are part of a grander scheme that is moving the entire universe from lower complexity towards higher complexity. And although we can't predict the details of that, we are helping the universe along to reach this higher level of complexity. And it's meant to be this way. So it's all going to be good.
And you think that there's some inevitability in all of this because, I mean, essentially you think we're already living in a computer simulation. You're in the camp with Elon on this one.
Well, in 1997, I wrote a paper which was called A Computer Scientist's View of Life, the Universe, and Everything, which was really about the simplest explanation of the universe. And it turns out the simplest explanation of the universe is a very, very short algorithm which lists all possible programs, first the short ones and then the longer ones and so on, and gives a little bit of computation time to all of those, allocates a little bit of time and interrupts those programs that want to that want to go on computing something. And some of these programs, they produce outputs. And some of these outputs are essentially video games. And some of these programs are video games that look a lot like this universe here. And some of these look almost exactly like this universe. And some people claim, especially in physics, you will find lots of people who think that there are lots of random events in the history of the universe, like spin up or down measured in some quantum event. However, there's an interpretation of all the physical observations that is consistent with the idea that it's all just a deterministic computation. And there's this very short algorithm that computes basically all possible universes, all logically possible universes. And this includes those that look a lot like this, but also others with slightly different physical laws and very different physical laws. And the whole thing is extremely simple. Now, it turns out that that there is a huge bias in this optimal master algorithm. It is optimal in a certain sense towards the simple and fast programs. So the universes that can be computed by fast and short programs that are greatly favored by the optimal way of computing all of that. And that's why why this isn't just a theory of everything and nothing, because it describes everything that you can think of. No, it also has a strong bias towards the simple things. And in particular, it allows you to predict that this particular universe is not going to go crazy suddenly, in the sense that this bottle is not suddenly lifting by itself up there to the ceiling and dissolving into randomness or doing something crazy like that, because the method, the algorithm that would compute such a universe which includes miracles like that would be longer and more complicated than the other one that doesn't, which is just using the laws of physics and a couple of basic simple laws to compute all the things that we have experienced in the past 13.8 billion years. So there is a very, very simple explanation of the universe, which has the disadvantage that it also explains lots of additional universes, but still has predictive power because of certain optimality properties. And this is what you are referring to. And this is what you mentioned when you said, yeah, I believe that we are in a simulation. Well, there are lots of simulations of lots of video games and universes in there. And as long as we don't have evidence, physical evidence to the contrary, we are obliged to find the short code of the universe, which is really explaining every little detail of the history of the universe, including the things that some people think are random, like beta decay and so on. And this offers a way of doing it.
Right. Well, as you can see, Jürgen's very fun to talk to you about all of these ideas. If you've never been to his website, I strongly recommend it. He's got a wealth of information on all kinds of topics and his thinking in different areas. And unfortunately, we've run out of time, so thank you very much for coming out here.
Thank you.